The air inside the Lucky Star Lounge on the Vegas Strip was thick with the cloying sweetness of cheap perfume, the sharp tang of spilled tequila, and the electric hum of neon signs that pulsed pink and green against the walls. Laughter ricocheted through the crowd, brittle and hollow, like glassware clinking in a toast that no one meant. Charlotte Whitmore perched on a high stool at the bar, her crimson cocktail dress catching the light like a warning signal. Her lipstick, a bold scarlet, was smudged at the corner from too many sips of her vodka martini, and her green eyes glinted with a dangerous mix of mischief and rebellion. She leaned over the rim of her glass, the cold bite of it grounding her as she scanned the room. 2 seats down, Harper, her oldest friend and least reliable influence, was halfway to blackout, her sequined top shimmering as she waved her phone like a magician's wand. "Come on, Charlie," she slurred, her voice cutting through the din. "You said you could marry anyone. Prove it." The gaggle of girls around her, society daughters with manicured nails and trust funds, erupted into cackles, their laughter sharp as shattered crystal. Charlotte grinned, twirling a strand of blonde hair around her finger, the motion deliberate, practiced. Her mother's voice, clipped and icy, echoed in her mind, "Don't embarrass the family, Charlotte." She drowned it with another sip, the vodka burning a path down her throat. Her gaze drifted to the bartender, Malik Johnson, who moved with quiet precision at the far end of the counter. His white shirt was rolled to the elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and dusted with faint scars from years of labor, burns from hot trays, nicks from broken glass. He didn't smile or flirt like the other bartenders, didn't play to the crowd. That stillness, that indifference to the glittering chaos around him, hooked her attention. "Him," Charlotte declared, her voice slicing through the noise as she pointed her glass at Malik. "I'll marry him," Harper shrieked, nearly spilling her drink. The bartender? "You won't." The girls howled, their laughter a mix of mockery and awe. Charlotte was already on her feet, her stilettos clicking against the sticky floor. Malik looked up, his brown eyes steady, unshaken by the spectacle. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice low, like the hum of a distant engine. She leaned across the bar, bold and careless, her perfume, a sharp floral with a hint of citrus, mixing with the scent of polished wood and spilled beer. "Yeah. Marry me." He blinked, then smirked, slow and unimpressed, wiping a glass with a rag that had seen better days. "Is that a serious proposal, or just rich girl rebellion?" The girls behind her roared with laughter, Harper loudest of all. Charlotte bit her lip, tasting the faint wax of her lipstick. "What if it's both?" Malik set the glass down, his hands steady, and met her eyes without flinching. "I don't marry drunk strangers, even in Vegas. But if you're brave enough to remember this in the morning," he slid a napkin across the bar, his handwriting sharp and deliberate, "Chapel of Eternal Vows, 2 blocks down." "I get off at midnight." Charlotte stared at the napkin, the ink smudged slightly from the damp bar top. Harper's voice cut through, gleeful and disbelieving. "He called your bluff." Charlotte pocketed the napkin, her pulse louder than the bassline thumping through the lounge. "He doesn't think I will," she said, her heels clicking as she walked away, the challenge settling into her bones like a dare she couldn't ignore. That night, under the flickering fluorescent lights of the chapel, with a plastic Elvis grinning from a velvet backdrop, Charlotte showed up. Her dress was slightly wrinkled, her hair loose from its pins, but her eyes were clear, defiant. Malik was there too, still in his work shirt, the faint scent of bar soap and bourbon clinging to him. Neither spoke as they stood before the officiant, the air heavy with the absurdity of it all. The vows were quick, slurred by Charlotte's lingering buzz, steady in Malik's calm cadence. When it was done, he draped his jacket over her shoulders, the fabric warm and worn, and handed her a pen to sign the license. She did, her hand trembling not from doubt but from the weight of something she couldn't yet name. Interlude, audience engagement. Hello, Stop Racism family. Thank you for tuning in today. Before we dive deeper into Charlotte and Malik's story, I want to hear from you. Drop your country and state in the comments below. Where are you watching from? And tell us, what do you think of the story so far? Are you hooked? Let us know in the comments, we love reading them. Your words fuel us to keep creating. Let's make this video reach at least 50 comments. Your support means the world and drives us to share more stories like this. So comment, share, and keep the positivity flowing. Sunlight sliced through the hotel room blinds like a blade, cutting across Charlotte's face. She squinted, her throat raw from last night's vodka and regret. The room was unfamiliar: sterile hotel furniture, a tacky velvet headboard, and a plastic bouquet on the dresser that smelled faintly of dust. Her heels lay scattered on the carpet, one upright, one tipped over like a fallen soldier. Her phone, dead until she plugged it in, buzzed to life with a flood of notifications. Harper's messages were at the top. "You legend. You actually did it." "What now, Mrs. Johnson?" Charlotte groaned, pressing her forehead into her palm, her skin still carrying the faint scent of bar soap from Malik's jacket. Her head throbbed, each pulse a reminder of the night's blur. She reached for the folded paper on the nightstand, her fingers trembling as she unfolded it. The courthouse seal stared back at her, official and unyielding: Charlotte May Whitmore and Malik Andre Johnson. August 5, 2025. A witness's signature, a stranger's scrawl, made it real. "Holy hell," she whispered, lips parting in disbelief. She tried to laugh, but it came out weak, humorless, like air leaking from a punctured tire. "No way. No freaking way." Her heart slammed against her ribs as she scanned the text again, searching for a loophole, a prank, one of Harper's ridiculous setups. But it was real. She'd married a bartender she'd known for less than an hour. Her phone buzzed again. No texts from Malik, no voicemails. Just one missed call at 3:12 a.m., his number glowing on the screen. She paced barefoot across the carpet, the marriage license clutched in her hand. This was supposed to be a story to laugh about over brunch, a wild Vegas tale to shock her friends. But something about it, the weight of the paper, the memory of Malik's steady gaze, felt more honest than anything she'd ever done. That scared her more than the legal consequences. She didn't tear the license. Instead, she folded it carefully, the creases deliberate, and tucked it into her purse. The Whitmore penthouse overlooked Central Park, its marble floors gleaming under crystal chandeliers, the air heavy with silence and expectation. Charlotte stepped inside, her heels echoing like gunshots. Her mother, Eleanor Whitmore, stood at the breakfast table, her navy blazer immaculate, her gray eyes sharp as she scrolled through her tablet. "What is this?" Her voice was calm, lethal, like the hiss of a blade being unsheathed. On the screen was a grainy photo: Charlotte in a wrinkled white dress, laughing beside a plastic Elvis, Malik standing tall and unreadable next to her. Charlotte's stomach flipped, the taste of bile rising in her throat. It was a joke, she muttered, tossing her purse onto the counter, the leather slapping against marble. Vegas. A mistake. Eleanor stood, her heels clicking as she crossed the room. "This mistake has a legally binding license attached to it. Do you even know his name?" Charlotte didn't answer. She didn't need to. Eleanor's tablet already had it printed in bold: Malik Andre Johnson, bartender. The last word landed like a slap. "We'll annul it quietly," Eleanor said, her tone final. Charlotte looked away, her fingers brushing the edge of her purse where the license hid. "I'll handle it." Hours later, alone in her bedroom, she stared at her phone, Malik's number glowing like a challenge. Her room was a museum of her life: framed photos of charity galas, a closet of designer dresses hung like armor, a life curated for approval. Her finger hovered over the call button. She tapped it. Point one ring. Two. Then his voice, low and unbothered: "Hey." "Charlotte Whitmore," he said, as if testing the weight of her name. "You sober now?" "I need to talk," she said, her voice careful, like stepping onto thin ice. About Vegas. The paperwork. You want out, he said, not a question. I figured. A pause, the sound of a glass clinking in the background. I won't sign anything over the phone. You want closure, come say it to my face. She blinked, caught off guard. Why? Because I was there too, he said, his voice steady but firm. I might not have a ring with a diamond the size of a glacier, but I stood beside you. I kissed you. I signed. That deserves a real goodbye, don't you think? The line went quiet. Charlotte stared at her reflection in the dark phone screen, her smudged eyeliner framing eyes that looked more lost than she'd ever admitted. Malik wasn't begging or pleading like the men she was used to. He was just, real. That unnerved her more than her mother's wrath ever could. The Vegas air was dry as bone, the sun unrelenting as it baked the cracked sidewalks. Charlotte stepped out of the cab, her tailored blazer too crisp for the weathered street. Malik's building was old, its stucco facade peeling like sunburned skin, but flower pots bloomed stubbornly on the balconies, their colors defiant against the faded paint. She paused at the steps, her heart pounding harder than it had in the penthouse. This wasn't just about signing papers anymore. Something about Malik, his quiet strength, his refusal to play her game, lingered like a melody she couldn't shake. She knocked, her knuckles sharp against the wood. Malik opened the door, a kitchen towel slung over his shoulder, the faint scent of roasted garlic and thyme wafting from inside. He wore a gray t-shirt, his hair slightly damp from a shower. He wasn't surprised to see her, just nodded and stepped aside. Took you long enough, he said, his voice carrying the faintest trace of amusement. She stepped into the small apartment, her eyes sweeping over the space, a worn leather couch, books stacked haphazardly on a coffee table, a framed photo of a young Malik with a woman who shared his eyes, his mother, she guessed. The air was warm, lived in, nothing like the sterile chill of her family's penthouse. I didn't expect, she started, then faltered, her fingers tightening around her purse strap. What? Malik asked, lifting a pan of sizzling vegetables off the stove. For me to have a stove? No, she said quickly, a flush creeping up her neck. I just didn't think you'd let me in. He glanced at her, his movements precise as he plated the food, grilled chicken, peppers, and onions, the colors vibrant against the white ceramic. You're here. I figured that meant something. She sat at the counter, her blazer feeling out of place against the chipped formica. Malik slid a plate toward her, the steam rising in lazy curls. You cook, she said, almost to herself. He smiled slightly, the first crack in his calm facade. Learned early. My mom worked nights. Someone had to feed my little brother. Charlotte exhaled, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, nails digging into her palms. I thought you'd be angry. I'm not. He leaned on the counter, his forearms flexing slightly. You don't scare me, Charlotte. She looked down at her plate, the food untouched. Everyone else wants something from me. You don't. That's confusing. I want things, he said, his voice low, deliberate. Just not what you're used to. They ate in silence, the clink of forks against plates the only sound. The food was simple but warm, the spices lingering on her tongue. When he leaned back, arms folded, he asked, Why'd you come? She hesitated, her fork hovering over a slice of pepper. I thought if I saw you again, it would feel fake. That maybe I imagined it all. Her eyes met his, unguarded for the first time. But you're the only thing about that night I remember clearly. He nodded once, his expression unreadable. Then maybe it wasn't all a joke. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a soft golden glow through the window, catching the planes of his face, high cheekbones, a faint scar above his eyebrow. For the first time, Charlotte stopped seeing him as a mistake. He was a mirror, reflecting not who she was but who she was terrified to become, honest, rooted, real. That scared her more than any annulment ever could. Interlude, audience engagement. How's this story hitting you so far? Drop a comment and let us know. If you're loving it, type 1. If it's not your vibe, type 0. We want to hear your thoughts. Back in New York, the Whitmore penthouse felt colder than ever, its marble walls and high ceilings swallowing sound like a tomb. The fresh roses on the kitchen island, arranged by staff, smelled faintly of nothing. Charlotte stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, her phone heavy in her hand, the Manhattan skyline glittering below like a promise she no longer believed in. Her mother hadn't asked about Vegas, just assumed it was handled. It wasn't. He took a seat across from her, his movements deliberate. And now? I still want you to have the choice, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Even if I want something different. He leaned back, his eyes never leaving hers. You think this changes what I already know? She looked at him, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Which is? You're not the same woman who walked into my bar with a dare on her lips and champagne on her breath. She didn't speak. He reached forward, slid the papers closer, and picked them up. Then, calmly, he tore them in half, then in half again, the sound sharp in the quiet room. I wasn't waiting on those, he said. I was waiting on you. Her eyes burned, but she blinked back tears. I'm not sure I deserve another chance. He leaned forward, his voice low. Good. That's how I know it's real. The torn papers lay scattered on the table, no ceremony, no grand gestures, just a quiet decision that something fake had become something true. That truth, fragile and unspoken, held more weight than any contract ever could. Interlude, audience engagement. How's this story hitting you? If you're loving it, type 1 in the comments. If it's not for you, type 0. We want to know what you think. It was a lazy Sunday morning, the Vegas air soft and warm. The bar was closed, and Malik was outside, fixing a crooked planter box on the sidewalk, a drill in one hand, a pencil tucked behind his ear. Charlotte stood in the doorway, watching him through the window, her coffee mug warm against her palms. The sunlight caught his jawline, dust clinging to his hands as he worked, a faint smile tugging at his lips. He didn't know she was watching. That's what made it beautiful. She raised her phone, framed him in the center, no filters, no edits, just him, and snapped the photo. Later, sitting on the back steps under the string lights, she posted it to her Instagram, the one her mother still monitored, the one her old friends dissected in whispers. Her caption was simple: he gave me the kind of love no one ever taught me to want. And now I don't want anything else. The notifications exploded, comments, DMs, media mentions. Harper messaged, "Are you serious?" Her mother called twice, ignored. Charlotte didn't hide. She sat beside Malik as he sanded a bench outside, reading the reactions aloud with a smirk. Apparently, I've fallen from grace, she said. That he looked up, his eyes warm. That what they're calling it? Some of them. She handed him her phone. Others say I look happy. He studied the post, then her. Do you? She nodded, her voice soft. For the first time, I'm not posing. He exhaled, a faint smile breaking through. So, now what? She shrugged, her fingers brushing his. Now they know. Now it's not a secret. And I'm still sitting right here. He squeezed her hand, dust still clinging to his fingers. You okay with being seen? She smiled, soft and sure. I've been seen before, but never like this. The distance between their worlds didn't vanish. It was simply walked through, hand in hand, no apology, no performance, just truth. Finally out in the open, the Vegas Strip hadn't changed, still loud, still flashing, still pretending to matter more than it did. But Charlotte walked it differently, in a soft cotton dress, her hair loose, Malik's fingers brushing hers as they moved through the crowd. They approached the Chapel of Eternal Vows, the plastic Elvis sign flickering above the door, its paint chipped but defiant. Inside, the air smelled of old roses and floor cleaner, the velvet curtain behind the altar sagging slightly, the fake stained glass catching the evening sun in fractured rainbows. Charlotte stopped in the middle of the room, her sneakers silent on the worn carpet. She turned to Malik, his face half lit by the warm light. "You remember anything about that night?" He smirked, leaning against a pew. "Yeah. You called me mystery man and almost tripped on your own vows." She laughed, the sound bright and unguarded. "And you asked if I was serious. You never answered." She stepped closer, her breath catching. "I am now." They stood in silence, the hum of dusty lights filling the space. No music, no audience, just the ache of full-circle clarity. Charlotte touched the edge of the altar, her fingers tracing the chipped wood. "I used to think this place was a mistake. A joke." Malik looked at her, his eyes steady. "Still might be." She raised an eyebrow. He added, "But some jokes are smarter than we are." She smiled, reaching into her bag and pulling out two simple silver bands, no diamonds, no show, just weight and meaning. "These okay?" He took one, slid it on his finger. "Perfect." She followed, the metal cool against her skin. They didn't need an officiant this time. They'd already made the vow: stay, try, be better, be real. Standing in the same place where it all began, they gave the moment something it never had the first time: truth. The sky above Vegas was soft and orange, the kind of sunset that made the city's lights look shy. On the rooftop of Malik's building, Charlotte stood barefoot on the concrete, the breeze tugging at her dress. Below, the city pulsed, horns, laughter, distant sirens, but up here, it was quiet, sacred. Malik stepped out from behind the rooftop door, holding a small black box, his eyes saying everything before he spoke. "You okay?" she asked, her heart stammering that he nodded, his voice low. "Better than okay." He knelt, not for show, not for pictures, but because some promises deserve gravity. His hand trembled slightly as he opened the box, revealing a simple gold ring, smooth and whole. "I married you once on a joke," he said, "and I didn't think it would mean anything. But the way you came back, the way you stayed, that meant everything." Her eyes burned, tears slipping down her cheeks. He continued, his voice steady. "I don't want to be your story anymore. I want to be your home." Charlotte knelt too, her knees touching his, her tears falling freely. "You already are." He held out the ring. "Then say it again. For real this time." She took the band, slid it on, and whispered, "Yes." The rooftop lights flickered on, casting a soft glow over the city. They didn't kiss right away. They held each other, forehead to forehead, breath caught in his warmth, steady, grounded, complete. In a city built on illusion, they had found something painfully, beautifully real. This time, it wasn't a dare. It was love, fully chosen, fully theirs. She called Malik that night, her heart in her throat. He answered on the second ring. "You home?" he asked, his voice warm, like a hearth she didn't deserve. "Yeah," she said softly, curling her knees to her chest on her bed, the silk sheets cool against her skin. "Didn't expect to hear from you." He chuckled, the sound low and gentle. "Same." They talked for 15 minutes, about the weather, about a book he was reading, about the way her mother's voice could cut through a room without rising. The next night, she called again. Then the night after that. On the fourth call, she asked, "Why do you keep answering?" "Because I like how you sound when you're not pretending," he said. "It's rare." Her breath caught. She looked around her room, framed photos of gala smiles, a closet of dresses she wore like costumes, a life built on appearances. "I don't know who I am without all this," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "You do," he said. "You just don't trust her yet." She laughed, a soft, shaky sound. "You always talk like that." "Only when it matters." Their calls became a lifeline, midnight whispers, daily check-ins. He sent photos of books he thought she'd like, their covers worn from use. She sent sarcastic selfies from charity luncheons, her smile tight, her eyes searching. Somewhere in the silences and banter, something took root, warm, fragile, unexpected. She didn't tell her mother. She didn't know how. For once, someone saw her, not the Whitmore name, not the headlines, just her. That felt like the start of something she'd been missing her whole life, even if she couldn't name it. Charlotte met Malik at JFK, her wool coat too heavy for the late summer air, her hands stuffed in her pockets to hide their trembling. He stepped off the escalator, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, his navy button-down slightly wrinkled from the flight. His calm was unshaken, his eyes finding her instantly. "You really came," she said, her voice caught between relief and disbelief. "You really asked," he replied, a faint smile tugging at his lips. They hugged, brief but real, his jacket smelling of cedar and airplane air. At the Whitmore estate, the dining room shimmered under glass chandeliers, the tables set with bone china and silver that gleamed like judgment. Charlotte wore a deep green dress, approved by her mother, but it felt like a costume. Malik, in clean slacks and his button down, stood out before he even spoke. Eleanor Whitmore greeted him with a tight nod, her wineglass catching the light. "So, this is the bartender," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "You clean up well." Malik didn't flinch. "I get that a lot. Mostly from people who expect less." Charlotte shot her mother a look, her fingers tightening around her fork. "Can we just have dinner?" The evening dragged, the conversation curling around stock portfolios and private school admissions. Malik listened, his silence louder than the chatter. When Charlotte's cousin leaned in, smirking, and asked, "So, what do you do again?" Malik didn't miss a beat. "I run a small hospitality business," he said. "Bar management, staff training, community mentoring on the side." A pause. The cousin raised an eyebrow. "So, you're still behind the counter?" "No," Malik said, his voice even. "I'm behind the people who stand behind the counter. There's a difference." Later, in the hallway, Charlotte caught up to him as he pulled on his coat. "You're leaving?" He nodded. "I don't belong here, and that's okay. But you need to ask yourself if you do." Her throat tightened. "I'm sorry." She's not the only one," he said gently. "You didn't stop her. You didn't say a word." "I didn't know how," she admitted, her voice cracking. "That's the problem." He walked out, his steps quiet but proud, leaving behind a room full of everything Charlotte had grown up thinking mattered. For the first time, she hated it, not him, not them, but herself. Charlotte sat on the edge of her mother's ivory couch, the fabric pristine as a wedding dress. Eleanor paced by the window, her wineglass glinting, her voice sharp as ever. "You embarrassed yourself, Charlotte. That boy humiliated you. You're lucky no one from the board saw." Charlotte stared at her hands, her nails bitten down, trembling against her knee. "He didn't humiliate me. You did." Eleanor turned, her eyes narrowing. "Excuse me." Charlotte stood, her voice unsteady but resolute. "You talk about legacy, image, bloodlines, like people are trophies." Malik didn't say a word out of place, and I said nothing. "That's on me." Eleanor's face hardened. "You're not thinking clearly." "No, I am. For the first time." Charlotte stepped closer, her heart pounding. "I quit the foundation. I'm moving out. I'm done letting you dictate my worth." Eleanor scoffed. Where will you go? Back to Vegas? Play house in a rented apartment with a man you barely know? Charlotte's voice cracked but held. I don't know what it'll be, but at least it'll be mine. She walked out, leaving behind the penthouse, the roses, the life she'd been molded to fit. No suitcase, no plan, just a wallet, a coat, and a heart finally breaking free. By nightfall, Charlotte stood outside Malik's bar, the Vegas street quiet except for the distant hum of neon. She knocked on the side door, her breath catching. He answered, looking tired, his eyes softening when he saw her. I don't have a plan, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Just the truth. I was silent because I was raised that way, but I'm not staying silent anymore. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Why now? Because losing you felt worse than losing everything else. He didn't smile, but he stepped aside. She stepped in, not as a dare, not as a Whitmore, but as herself, whoever that was. She was ready to find out. Malik laid a pillow and a folded blanket on the worn couch, the fabric soft from years of use. Charlotte stood awkwardly near the kitchen doorway, the faint scent of coffee lingering in the air. 1 week, he said, not turning around. No drama, no press, no pretending. She nodded, her hands clasped tightly. I'm not here for show. He glanced over his shoulder, his eyes searching hers. Then you can start by wiping tables. This isn't a hotel. The next morning, she pulled her hair into a messy ponytail and walked into the bar's backroom, wearing one of Malik's oversized flannel shirts. It smelled of pine and something steady, like him. She scrubbed tables, the wood grain rough under her hands, sorted bottles that clinked softly, and restocked shelves, her movements clumsy but earnest. The regulars, construction workers, single moms, retirees, came and went, most recognizing her from the tabloids but saying nothing. She overheard snippets of their lives, overdue rent, birthdays with no gifts, kids scraping by in school. It was a world she'd never touched, but it didn't feel beneath her. It felt alive. Later, she joined Malik behind the counter. He handed her a rag, nodding toward a stubborn spill. You missed a spot. She smirked. Bossy. Clean is clean, he said, a faint smile breaking through. Doesn't matter who does it. They shared lunch at a rickety table in the back alley, under string lights Malik had strung himself. The sandwich was simple, ham, mustard, rye, but it tasted better than any gala meal she'd ever had. You built this place, she said, looking around at the bar's faded brick walls. Piece by piece. He nodded. After my mom passed, I needed something that felt like mine. She looked at him, his hands calloused but steady. You made it feel like home. He didn't answer, just watched her with a quiet intensity that made her feel seen, not as a headline but as a person. That night, as she settled onto the couch, Malik passed her a fresh towel. You're not bad at this, he said. She laughed softly. At what? Showing up. Her smile faded into something tender. That's all I want to do now. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she had to perform. She just had to be. That was harder, and better, than anything she'd ever known. On the third night, while folding laundry beside the couch, Charlotte opened a drawer, searching for a fresh pillowcase. Instead, she found them, the annulment papers, creased and slightly yellowed, her name and Malik's printed clean in the corner, the marriage date stamped like a scar. She froze, her breath catching, when Malik walked in from his office, a stack of invoices in hand. She was sitting at the table, the papers in front of her. He paused, his eyes flicking to the documents. I found these, she said, her voice steady but soft. I know, he replied, walking past her to the fridge, pulling out a bottle of water. I brought them the first time I came back, she admitted, her eyes on the table. I thought if I gave you the choice, it would make everything easier.